Good. So bandshells as functional sculptures and also bandstands. We will come to the difference of both terms later. Is the topic of my PhD, and let me show you this. So these are the Offenbacher Kurkonzerte because we have a bandstand in the Dreieich Park in Offenbach, and I organizing this concert. And the footnote is that in 1888, a thermal spring was discovered in Offenbacher Main, whose water was similar in its composition of that to Vichy, Karlsbad, Ems, and slightly similar to Kissingen. So first there was a bandstand at that time, the one that's remained, spa rooms and a spa, a Kurpark, a spa park, with Kurkonzerte being played every day. After becoming the Kaiser Friedrich Quelle, the industriation developed in Offenbach. We have a big leather industry and also the German Museum of Leather, Leder Museum. And the spring got polluted, and that was all the history of the attempt of Offenbacher Main becoming Bad Offenbach as a kurort. So the spring got closed. So I encountered, by this nice footnote, a type of architecture that, especially in its sculptural dimension, is a fascinating subject from an art historical subject, but apparently the potential for being used in a contemporary manner has not been identified by now. As an example of performative architecture, the bandstand or bandshell, with its characteristic shell shape, is part of the cultural legacy of spa towns alongside musical practice. While for decades or even a century, the bandstand was the main highlight of a kurpark, going back to this is in Bansin on Usedom, by the way, the island in northern East Germany. And yeah, it was the main highlight of a kurpark or a seaside. Today, sadly, it is increasingly not only given or over to neglect, but even given to decay. This one, you can see it was in to the left, it was the music pavilion in the Clara Zetkin Park in Leipzig, but it got renovated by an association for its 100th birthday, lucky for this bandstand. And to the right, we have one in the Lausitz. And that's, mostly you can see this at the moment, which is really sad. So I will approach my topic in 3 stages. In the first stage, I will consider the microcosmos spa resort, the extraordinary historical and social setting that gave rise to the bandshell as a type. And in the second stage, I will explore its shape from an architectural standpoint, including all the aspects of its functionality and sculptural nature. In the third section of the theory, the focus will be on the theatricality and performativity of the construction today. Parallel to the historical examination, this exploration will reveal past and contemporary concepts for use. And today I'd like to show you some examples of this. So from the 19th century onwards, the spa and bathing culture developed rapidly. Elaborate and profit-oriented construction programs were initiated, drinking fountains and pump rooms built for taking the healing waters, the first green spaces and spa parks designed, graduation houses converted to outdoor inhalatoriums, and thermal baths constructed. These were joined by assembly houses, later casinos, sporting facilities, and bandstands. These were firmly established in the infrastructure of spa resorts and provided a musical accompaniment for people taking the waters or exercising. The close connection between architecture and nature, as well as the combination of therapeutic treatments with a comprehensive range of entertainment, transformed spa resorts that offered so many different experiences into miniature cities, but with the added benefit of a natural setting. Traveling with no specific purpose in mind, the start of tourism, and breaking free from everyday routine fueled the social diversity amongst the spa guests. Here, ideas were anticipated that would later take hold of a wider society, a consciousness for leisure, internationality, body awareness, and sport. Within this organism, the bandstand, together with its seating arrangement, assumed a role as a major space for communication. Within the Kurpark, a picturesque garden landscape that was designed primarily to be a place for conversation, contemplation, and recreation, it served as an urban auditorium. The spa concerts provided therapy for the soul, increased people's well-being, and facilitated social contacts. I don't consider it is too speculative to wonder whether what played out here is what we would call today and refer as holistic. So who came to spas and who did they meet and what they wrote when they were there? The influence that the thermal places of Europe had on music making over the last 3 centuries can already be clear through name dropping with pieces that were either composed in or for spas. Mozart's anthem Ave Verum Corpus, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Berlioz' opera Beatrice and Benedict, Brahms' First and Second Symphonies, Wagner's Lohengrin and Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, most of Franz Lehar's operettas, including Die lustige Witwe and Offenbach's La Belle Hélène. Like other visitors, several musicians and composers came to the spas just for a cure, like anyone else. George Frederick Handel came to Aachen after he had lost the use of his right arm. Franz Liszt came as a patient to Karlsbad, and Richard Wagner was an enthusiast on the new science of hydrotherapy, as well as he admitted that a water diet helped him against the evils of wine. Other musicians came rather to chill out, so to say, to distress in the calm and relaxing atmosphere of these enchanted places. For composers and performers alike, spas offered a chance to unwind from the pressure of the stage that mostly are pressures of a frenetic lifestyle. It is not surprising, to quote Ian Bradley here, that spas were with their unreal, escapist, and enchanted settings are congenial places to write operas given to their plots. Throughout the 20th century, when less emphasis was placed on medical cures than on general retreat and detoxing, Stravinsky, Ida Rubinstein, and others came to recharge their batteries. But it was not only of therapeutic reasons. Spa towns also offered well possibilities to make money. The spa towns were filled with rich and influential visitors who wanted to enjoy daily programs of concerts and balls. Musicians and conductors were employed during the summer months, a season when most of the urban city theaters and concert halls were closed. Many of the spa resorts in Europe today continue to have their own spa orchestra. However, the spa orchestra scene is considered to be a peripheral phenomenon in cultural production, as a relic from a tradition that was not questioned and without any great commitment. But is there a more active music scene or specific music productions that can play a role alongside the use of music for psychotherapeutic purposes in a spa resort and wellness centers? Naturally, there's a great difference between the classic chamber music that Brahms or Beethoven wrote in Bad Ischl, from Strauss and Lehar's operetta premieres in Karlsbad, and today's spa music that fluctuates somewhere between new age panpipes and whale songs. The market for wellness and retreat sounds is immense. Spa music no longer consists of catchy melodies and waltzes played during bygone tea dances. Whether today it seeks to support a new generation of wellness enthusiasts in search of peace and relaxation. Should a nowadays bandshell be more like a silent monument, a place of silence and contemplation for burnout managers? So this was the introduction short on spa music and what it could be today. And now we come to the main topic of my thesis, and it's the sculptural pavilions, shell and microarchitecture. So in the second chapter of my work, I aim to demonstrate through juxtaposition of their qualities and with the aid of an architectural analysis of exemplary buildings, how strongly the bandshell and in particular the bandstand and in particular the shell type in spa resorts differ from other constructions in public space used for performance. I got the question of how the shell shape came out per se. Is it a native of German spa resorts? And is the form of the shell the kind of endemic to seaside resorts and climate air spas? Is it a cut of microarchitecture, a kinetic sculpture maybe, or just a music pavilion? So pavilion architecture, which is only to a certain extent of a permanent nature, and the architecture in spa complexes share many common characteristics. As a temporary building, according to the German federal building regulations, destined for removal after use, the pavilion characterizes the experimental approach to architecture. It has its origins in celebrations, consistently following its mission of adding places for entertainment or refuge to the structure of daily life in parks, gardens, and cities. It is obvious that it was welcomed in the Kurparks of the 18th and 19th century, as these were places where people consumed and indulged in other enjoyable pursuits. Today, however, given their short lifespan, pavilions have to attract as much attention as possible, are a hot topic in architectural debates, are always shockingly different if you consider the Serpentine Gallery pavilions in England, which I will show you an example later. By contrast, the bandstand seems like a relic from another time. My thesis aims to find out where it can be reinvented, again through artistic and creative approaches and given new contemporary tasks. So the bandshell is a spatial hybrid between a sculpture and a stage. You can see here, for example, Swinemünde in Poland, which has the funny nickname of Sunny Side Up. And to the right, it's Southampton in UK. It's not in a spa resort, but to the seaside, and it has a flip side. So the front side is a convex building for artistic performances, and the other side goes to a street and is a bus stop with a bench inside. So it can also be always multifunctional. They are temporary spaces and artistic objects when they are activated by performance as well as places of communication. The bandshell has an inherent performative, transformative potential. Transformative because it gathers, due to his location and most of the time free entrance, easily and barrier-free accessible to gather people of diverse backgrounds and diverse educational. A Kurkonzert is therefore at the intersection of social gathering and artistic intervention and can inspire the audience. As I mentioned, the Kurkonzert is not an advanced culture event or space. It is open. It is inclusive and non-commercial. Theaters, opera houses, and Kursäle embody artistic and social ideals. By dividing the auditorium in different lodges, boxes, or price categories, they constitute social hierarchies. By staging certain lines of sight, the various stage forms structure the relationship between art and everyday life, as well as fiction and reality. But in front of the bandshell, the audience is heterogeneous. They are all the same, nevertheless of sick, rich, healthy, educated, or just strollers in the park. After all, the first bandstands in 19th century England were still open, roofed structures reminiscent of roundabouts and having an impact from all sides. So they had a 360 degrees immersion room. And while the French kiosque à musique, I will show you one. This one is in Lorient in France, in Bretagne. And while the French kiosque à musique were circular or polygonal stages that became eye-catchers on account of their lavish endowments, the bandstand with its half dome shape and dedicated architectural shape was something distinctly different. The base area is usually a circular disc serving as a stage, while the roof or baldachin is a cut-off spherical calotte, like a hood that tempts you to close it. So this one is from Baden-Baden. It is familiar to some of the visitors here. So simultaneously, it would also seem to cite the round and fountain temples found in Park. Here one could take into consideration to what extent there are borrowings from attached chapels and their apses, and whether the sacral aspect of domed buildings perhaps echoes in bandstands and their impact both acoustically and in terms of stage show. We will see this now very well in an example of butt kissing that I will give you soon. But with this here, furthermore, it needs to be explored whether a design borrowed from nature was truly transferred to the field of architecture. Can the architectural shape be traced back to acoustic considerations, or could the outcome be judged to have been inspired by a natural shape, if at all? You see the muscle shape here. So let me now please introduce you to some outstanding constructions in Germany. So this is Bad Nauheim, and Bad Nauheim features the bandstand as a concrete music temple within the Kur complex. In the Art Nouveau building, the lezine structuring of the walls, you see my mouse, by the way? Of the walls, the coffered ceiling and the overarching hipped roof remind characteristic features of the country house style and classicism at both. And reflected by the fountain complex are all the more conspicuous. Around the same time, in other words, roughly 1910, one of the most noteworthy bandstand was realized in Bad Kissing. The Kissing spa facilities, actually built between 1834 and 1838, were expanded in 1910. The re-owned Munich architect Professor Max Littmann was commissioned for the project. In addition to two new buildings, the Brunnenhaus and the Festsaalbau, the Wandelhalle was built, replacing an open fountain pavilion from 1842. The Wandelhalle is still the largest in Europe, resembling a mighty sacred building. Littmann is one of the most important theater architects, as he reformed the civics theater. He designed auditoriums like amphitheaters, reducing or omitting boxes to allow a good view for all. In the Hoftheater in Weimar, for example, he was the first to build a movable or variable proscenium, which made it possible to cover the orchestra in order to switch flexibly between drama and opera. In Bad Kissing, he designed one of the first revolving stages with a turning circle of 180 degrees. The revolving shell is an iron structure with inner wooden cladding and outer cladding made out of Grüntal copper from the Erzgebirge. The turntable runs on 8 rollers and a rail track. The controls for it are located on the back wall. Under the podium, there's an electric motor and a gear drive. The turntable was built by the Georg Noell company from Würzburg. The seatings are from Tonet. not the one you see on the left picture, but I will show you later, Siedlungsarbeit based upon designs by Atelier Littmann. The Wandelhalle was designed as a cruciform basilica with the fountain house and vestibule in its arms. In its apse on the north side, as you can see here, is the Orchestermuschel. It is located in the lower part between the arcas, the triforium, and the light arcade, dividing them. The basilical form of the space shares the profane values of the public hall. The orchestra shell can be turned towards the Kurgarten and expand due to weather conditions. I would like to emphasize whether, given its difference to closed structures, this bandshell has the potential of becoming mobile architecture or kinetic sculpture. This opens up the topic of flexibility, mobility, and consequently suitable materials for contemporary bandshells. So let me introduce you now to one of the newest bandshells in a German seaside, which was also the title of this lecture. So it's the Kurmuschel in Sassnitz on the island of Rügen. Until about 1819, Sassnitz on the island of Rügen in northeast Germany had a provisional Kurplatz at the beach promenade. The square was a product of chance because the chalk manufacturer Küster needed a loading place on the shore to cut costs. Already in 1894, he built the restaurant Bieramare, beer by the sea there. The name, offensive for the time, was probably an allusion to the Miramare castle built for Erzherzog Maximilian near Trieste. Despite the continuing popularity of the square, among other things, open-air cinema events were held here after 1945. The concert shell was left to rot and removed in the early 1980s. It's the one you can see in the pictures down. In its place, the master builder Ulrich Müther created today's music pavilion from 1986 to 1988. You see the construction here. This concrete shell structure was only recently modernized by the Wüstenrot Foundation. The expressively shaped bandstand has an extremely striking structure that, with its shaped projection, also recalls a whale's fin or a chanterelle mushroom. The fanned-out shell roof is attached to a lattice of band-reinforced rods, onto which with the help of wire netting sprayed concrete was applied, reflecting Müther's preference for high-par shells. So now it looks like this, and it has a great acoustic. So now to the performativity of the playgrounds of Europe and the bandshells. So the theory is the architectural shape is relevant as it calls for the revitalization of architecture for performance purposes. Essentially, the Kursaal is a prestigious room intended to host more serious highbrow art, while the bandstand serves to provide entertainment and leisure. Accordingly, it occupies a low-key position within the overall spa complex and only comes into its own when it has an audience that is drawn into the music by the excellent acoustic it offers. In which situation the bandstand develops authority as an acoustic model? Is it only when the space is used for music and the performing arts that this type of building demonstrates its function, or does the shell have completely different inherent qualities that it seldom reveals? In addition, there are the construction acoustical factors of the specific construction of reflection compared with the arrangement of the audience, typically in a quadrant or semicircle on white benches. Precisely in the surroundings of the spa park, the relation between organic nature, stage, and auditorium results in a further aspect that has an impact on both the perceptual and receptive modes. Unlike the performance space in a theater, the bandstand has, in addition to a spatial restriction, a wide sound and immersion chamber that it can exploit. Admittedly, the visual axis is oriented to frontality, but the effective acoustic area of a bandstand is geared towards a kind of transmission that seeks to win over and attract the attention of the viewers and listeners. In this manner, it can be said to serve like a siren in the Kurpark and enforces its bonding force and becomes a place where socialization processes take place. But what happens to it in the moment of inactivity? Owing to its nature as a public space for sound reflection, does it become a place for informal performances whereby the potential of its architecture is actually recognized and realized? And why was this apparently never recognized on a large scale? In most Kurparks, the stage can be used free of charge and is not subject to opening or closing hours. No sign forbids people to enter it, yet such buildings tend to exude an aura of exclusion. Is this perhaps the very reason why they are often simply taking over for unofficial performances? So by this thesis, I will show you now like site-specific artistic productions that happened in music pavilions or bandshells, and followed by some architectural examples. So at the Biennale für Freiburg, a festival for contemporary art initiated in 2020, the Nigerian artist Rarima Gambo presented her video piece, A Walk in this bandstand. Unfortunately, there's no photo documentation from the Biennale. It was organized in a student group, but yeah, this is the music pavilion the video was presented in. And the work cites the practice of walking as a narrative act. Simultaneously, the artist undertakes an act of healing by reassembling found material that was torn apart in objects. Initially, the practice is highly reminiscent of the connection between strolling and searching for healing in spa resorts. Even it did not happen in a spa bandshell, but in a music pavilion. This example is just quickly, it's from Vienna, and the video artist For Your Eye teamed up with the Frankfurt Atelier Markgraf to show a projection mapping. However, at the end of the piece entitled Natur der Nacht, Nature at Night, the performance morphed into an open stage for everyone wishing to show their own visuals. This example demonstrates once again that it's an open and inclusive form of structure which can be appropriated, a fact that can be developed into a concept for usage. So this is, as you have seen the unrenovated thing before, the music pavilion in the Clara Zetkin Park in Leipzig. The ceiling construction of the historical music pavilion became kind of a canvas. In 2012, Professor Heribert Otterbach and Christian Weihrauch from the HGB in Leipzig, the art school, worked with students for 7 weeks of the painting class, and they produced this 48 square meter large fresco inside the pavilion, depicting a map together with paths and topographies of the park. The image is intersected by strolling persons. The act of strolling is also depicted in this artwork, as you can see. In the international art project Voluptuous Bad Ems by Mohamed Abdullah, Stefan Lundgren, Felder, and Jan-Philipp Scheibe in Bad Ems 2004, the topic was not a bandstand, but the project did analyze the visible signs of decay in a spa resort, struggling to reposition itself and the equally visible traces of its old glory. The quartet employs illuminated plays on words, invitations, and cryptic statements to produce ironic interventions in public space. Here the word wandeln, that in Germany either can mean to stroll, but also it means change, peeped out in the line of vision between the monument Kaiserdenkmal and the casino. As a result of the exhibition Voluptuous Bad Ems, strollers in the spa resort doubtless began to wonder whether or not it might be better to conjure up on a more attractive past. The next example is I don't know if someone from Bad Mergentheim is here, but in the middle of the Bad Mergentheimer Kurpark, the water dances, as the tourist guide describes it, up to 7 times a day in front of the bandshell, and it's actually a quite beautiful object with the leaf ornamentation on the outer columns. A light fountain installation was built that could not be more innovative. Each playtime, it features Elton John, Alpha Will with Forever Young, Jennifer Rush with The Power of Love, The Phantom of the Opera, and the Indiana Jones theme. Beside that, the Hungaria Spa and Salon Orchestra plays, depending on the weather, in the pavilion or in the Wandelhalle. The Kurorchester plays twice a day, except Tuesdays and Thursdays. So this is a really nice sculpture. It's the example of a bandshell, which is like really a shell. It's located in Canada. It's an artistic study in the use of complex curved geometry to amplify and direct sound within an open stage setting. Based on the principle of the parabolic reflector, the limelight bandshell, as it's called, was intended to remind the viewers and users of the dynamic geometry of sound and light reflection. The sculpture is a simple and effective way to transform formal and informal performances into memorable and unique experience within the public realm. The curved ridges which create the unique sculptural character, the artwork originates at a central focus and are reflexively articulated on both sides of the shell. The concave convex form of the shell speaks to paired artistic themes of positive and negative, inside and outside, light and dark, and shadow and reflection. This is a example from Bamberg in the Hain Park, which has a really nice history because the bandshell has seen and experienced really a lot of the ages. It cultivated dance evenings in the 20s, like Nazi party rallies after 33, ballet and theater in the 50s, hippie festivals in the 1970s. And in the summer of 1973, you can see a picture down to the left. Fans from all over Germany made a pilgrimage to Bamberg for the open air concert of the krautrock band Guru Guru. And the shell was built, it was first built from the bathing house that was reconstructed in 1940. And they just took the parts from the bathing house, that is like a neoclassicism temple, and built the bandshell out of this. And what remained is the gable and the columns and the two sphinxes sitting down there. And what's quite interesting, today a sculptor called Adalbert Hein lives in the backside of he has his atelier, his studio there, but also a small flat, and he lives in the backside of the shell. So this is called the Wagram-Fenster, the Wagram window. And this is a really synergetic project because the two brothers, Martin, architect, and Werner, sculptor, Feiersinger, built one of the rare new shells in the community of Königsbrunn am Wagram in Austria. Their Wagram-Fenster is a stage suitable for performances by the local choir and band, as well as for wine tastings or theater evenings. It's a walk-in sculpture located on a high plateau. The Feiersinger brothers have developed a freestanding pavilion out of the cipher of anonymous rural building, whose striking silhouette draws attention to the new meeting place from afar. The concept of the loggia as a transitional area between outside and inside, and the method of shell-shaped roofing complement each other. With its dazzling white, the Wagram window could be intended as a reference to a micro-Hollywood bowl. Artistic discourse and architectural program enter into an ideal union that will change the spatial experience and aesthetic perception. And by the way, it's not listed as a building, but as art in public space. So this is a bandstand that was also on the title of my presentation. So the London-based artist and designer Morik Mayaskov creates installation and immersive spatial artworks that transform places and champion community and public interaction, like the main aim of a bandstand or a bandshell. Her work is characterized by an engaging boldness, creating specific local responses to each distinct audience that will see and experience the work, using it to create community and build identity. Morik makes places from spaces that people like to be in, that stimulate and often make you smile. The bandstand was Morik's first ever mobile installation, and it toured to 8 locations. So what I already said about the pavilion architecture that is mostly temporary, you probably know the Serpentine pavilions, and this one is the 20s. The Serpentine Gallery in London is one of the most famous and influential museums of contemporary arts in the world. It's located in the Kensington Gardens and directed by Hans-Ulrich Obrist. In an annual architectural commission, the gallery showcases new temporary buildings by international architects. The Trenty Serpentine Pavilion is designed by Johannesburg-based Bureau Counterspace, directed by Sumaya Wali. She is, by the way, the youngest architect ever given to the Serpentine Pavilion. The pavilion's design is based on past and present places of meeting, organizing and belonging across several London neighborhoods significant to diasporic and cross-cultural communities as a transnational exchange. The forms in the pavilion are a result of abstracting, superimposing and splicing elements from architectures that vary in scales of intimacy, translating the shapes of community architecture like mosques and churches. For the first time, and this is really interesting, in the history of this commission, 4 fragments of the pavilion are placed in partner organizations whose work has inspired the design of the pavilion. For example, one of the first Black publishers and booksellers in the UK called New Bacon Books, another multi-purpose venue and a radio station and arts center. These fragments are like gestures of decentralizing architecture to include a multitude of voices. Since its inception, the pavilion has become an established home for live programs. This year, the pavilion was also host a special commission sound program, Listening to the City, that features work by artists including Aine Bailey and Jay Bernard, connecting visitors to the stories and sounds of selected London neighborhoods. An interesting anecdote to all of this is also that the Therme Group, and it's the world's largest company for building resorts and thermal baths, is the main sponsor of this project. The company's vision stands for an urban oasis of mind, body, and soul, for a culture of health and the well-being of millions of guests over the year, as well as the complex interplay of nature, technology, and culture. So I think a local city administration of Spandaus can really learn from this project. So what I'd also like to show you, and this is the comparison side to from the bandshells to like open air stages. This is the 31 hectare big park of Grafneck Castle in Austria. And like the castle itself, the park was built in the 19th century in the style of Romanesque historicism. The new open-air pavilion, the Wolkenturm, translated to Cloud Tower, designed by the architect's office, The Next Enterprise, was opened in June 2007. Together with the landscape architect's land inside, an acoustically optimized enclosure, but also a land art project was realized. The architects see the pavilion as part of a larger reference field that places existing elements of the complex, including the new main entrance, the riding school, the castle, and the Black Gate in a new context. The building presents itself in an eisel. Here, the play of staging glances and spatial sequences, the purposeful framing and concealing of attraction, which is often determined in the landscape garden by the curved pathway, is made clear. Visitors can approach from the castle and dive into the cutting edge, which leads them under an artificial hill. It's the same concept of strolling like on the passes in the picturesque garden, where the concept of strolling is already the event. Inside the cloud tower, behind nearly 230 square meter sound shell of the stage, the artist lounges and rehearsal rooms, a piano depot, technical rooms, and acoustic locks are arranged. The steel structure of the stage roof, placed on top of the reinforced concrete structure of the sound shell, sees itself as an independent sculptural object that seems to float above the landscape at treetop level. It reflects the surrounding on its surface, and as the bandshell, it tries to be translucent in the park. The cloud tower, according to the architects, interprets with topographical shaping, essential design feature of the landscape garden, the play with perspective and visual relationships, with narrowness and expanse, with spatial closure and spatial opening. The moving sculpture above full orchestra then perhaps echoes a metaphor of Arthur Schopenhauer, in which architecture is famously described as frozen music. Anyway, where could this metaphor fit better than here? And though I like to close the talk with just my question that is the main thing about all my research is, why is the Kurmuschel replaced by open air stages? And even there's such a big stock, why is the Kurmuschel not used like an open air stage anymore, and why they are get abandoned or just substituted by other architectures? And yeah, thank you for listening. And I hope you have some valuable comments and hints, or any anecdotes or critics for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sabine. This was overwhelming, to say the least, particularly for people who are perhaps not fully versed in both fields that intersect here, be it architecture, be it music. So I have a quite difficult task to comment on this paper, but I try to keep it short and just as a kind of springboard into a broader discussion, I hope. So I remind you that you're very welcome also to formulate your questions or comments in the chat, while I'll try to pinpoint a few moments of this very, very interesting talk, a very thought-provoking talk, I think. So I think sort of I would be ill-advised if I sort of try to follow you in all these kind of very detailed deliberations of what architecture is and can be and should be. But I sort of noted four terms around which I think a lot of the thought-provoking ideas that you presented us with can be at least provisionally organized. If you start from what you said, actually as a closing remark, right? Sort of the replacement of the shells by open air stages. I mean, sort of, it is a stage, right? Sort of, and as such, obviously, it relates to other forms of stage buildings. And I found it particularly interesting that there are actually sort of solutions that work between the different genres. If I think of a closed theater or a Kursaal, and then you had the example from Kissing, where this is combined, right? Where you could sort of turn the stage to the inside or the outside, and then sort of the many kind of different forms of outside stages. What seemed to be important here is that a closed or fully closed building that contains a stage obviously invites to different types of listening. Perhaps I'm super simplifying things here, but I sort of got the idea that if you go to listen to a concert in a Kursaal, or if you just happen to be in a Kurpark and music is playing, is two totally different pair of shoes. And sort of the Kurmuschel seems to take away a sort of perhaps also not very clever but very popular separation in 20th century culture between kind of highbrow music and this kind of lowbrow popular music, music that is not sort of listened to with the same kind of concentration that you have in a concert hall, but something that plays in the back, right? Sort of in the most kind of negative probably expression, what has been called muzak in these shopping malls and everything. So in a sense, perhaps the spa is again a bit of a trailbreaker here for this kind of new type of listening to music, which is obviously then in the 20th century facilitated by new technical interventions that sort of individualized the use of that kind of backdrop music through radio, through other kind of possibilities to record and replay music, which then in a sense perhaps it helped to explain why the original kind of function of such stages might have disappeared over long and have been replaced by others that sort of emphasize again a more kind of event, a communal socializing event, but of a different form than it used to be in the 19th century. The second term that I think is very central is obviously that you describe it as a sculpture, right? Sort of, I think sort of probably there will be some natural science explanations that explain that certain shapes are better suited to kind of either amplify or direct sounds in a different way. But then you pointed at the many actually metaphorical kind of illusions that this type of architecture produces, right? From the shell at the seaside resort, which seems to be more or less kind of natural metaphor, to all kinds of architectural influences that seem to create something which is characterized again by an opening, but perhaps in this kind of intersection of nature and air and room, which is still created, but only sort of limited on one side. So obviously there's a lot of invitation to think about the contextuality of this sculpture, right? Interestingly, very often with water and fountains, obviously one of the central motives of a spa resort, right? Sort of the source. And then I think sort of in practical terms, it can't be so probably practical to have water near a place where music is played, right? Either there's a kind of background sound emerging from a fountain, or perhaps even the kind of yeah, how to express that correctly, I don't know. In physics, I'm not very good, but sort of, I guess that a surface covered by water also kind of reflects sounds differently than another type of surface. So this kind of sculptural kind of aspect invites a lot of interpretations, and particularly also to place it in a larger kind of context of urbanism and landscaping that is so characteristic for the spa. But I noted two further terms. The third one is temporality, and this is something that I started thinking of actually visiting one of the places that you mentioned in your talk as well, Bad Ems recently, right? Sort of where you see indeed, as the project that you referred to here, the passing of time quite dramatically in some respects even. But more importantly, it seems to be interesting that the kiosk, the pavilion, and the bandstand is something that is built very quickly, very lightly, and not meant to last very long. But then sort of still these kind of sculptures, built sculptures, can remain, and what do we do with them, right? So there's a kind of temporal character in the way they are styled and made, very often very lightly, or other buildings, as you told us, are converted to them. So this aspect is quite interesting, and it sort of reminds me, sort of, I'm excusing for the background voices that are coming from my neighbors that are kind of doing a bit of restoration work in their house, right? But what I think is really interesting to think about, sort of how this temporality kind of plays out also in other aspects of spa architecture and spa planning, right? It is kind of very often quickly built, very fleshy, but not lasting long. And it's very often obviously also part of certain changing attitudes, right? I mean, you have the sequence of different architectural styles, but obviously in these kind of light build and light or lightly removed structures, this is perhaps even more prominent than in other parts of spa architecture. And finally, and linked to that, I found a very interesting aspect is that you link them to mobility, right? Obviously, you emphasize more than once the nice German coincidence of one Wandel being changed and something that you do bodily, right? Sort of a movement through space. And this kind of openness, the situation in the parks, and probably their kind of link, the link to one of the real sort of central pastimes at the spa, the strolling, or also the movement and the encounters that are produced in a Kur park or in a similar setting seems to be fascinating. But then again, particularly this London example that you brought for us, this kind of actually mobility of parts of the architecture that then sort of are carried as kind of references to places, that seems to be a very interesting element of that as well. Perhaps I keep it at that for my comments. If you wish to, you could obviously react to this while we are collecting then also questions and comments from the audience. Sabine-Lydia, would you want to start with some comments on my comments?
Oh, at first, I really have to get all your comments. I wrote it down, and it's really a lot. But yeah, as you said at the last point with the about mobility, I think it's something that is really common to a lot of examples that I found that I was not showing today. And it's also the mobility between time and space, and that could be a really interesting point for me. Yeah, thank you for identifying. Definitely. Yeah.
Shall we then open the floor to other comments or questions from the public?
So, as there haven't been any questions until now formulated in the chat, you might as well want to raise your hand, and we'll all keep an eye on it. So, but maybe while you are coming up with your questions, I'll take my chance to start. Lydia, thank you so much for this very interesting talk. I have two questions and like an anecdotal commentary. First question is of a more general nature, as you have shown us as well examples from non-spa places. So could you once again maybe summarize, is there a specificity of the band stand in the spa? Once again, because some of the examples seem to be quite near, whether they are in Vienna or in a seaside resort. And the second aspect, I was really fascinated by, if I understood it correctly, you said that the bandstand is a non-exclusive space, which is not regulated, so people could enter it freely to do their own performances there. So my first question is, did I really understand that right? So there is no regulation, you could just, when it's not taken, next time the European Spa team will take its chance and perform spontaneously, because that's really what would be interesting. And supposedly people don't know it if they don't use this opportunity, because it's quite ununique in our public spaces that you might really perform or use this place for your own purposes. And then, rather as anecdotal evidence, as you were asking for that, as Astrid and me and then people from the team are working in the field of literature. So I remember from my readings that, of course, the bandstand and the orchestra playing is very often discussed in fictional literature and in travelogues as well. And very, very often the orchestra is characterized as rather bad. So if opposed to the music being performed in the theaters or in the opera, and maybe this might be a hint as well why parts of the music move to these seemingly more professionalized festival scenes, because it seems to be a question of genre and of technology you need and storage. And so yeah, that's might add to that. Thank you.
There's an anecdote to play back. There's a piece of Paul Hindemith. It's called Der Fliegende Holländer, played by a very bad Kurorchester at 7 in the morning. And it's like Musik konkret. It's really weird and it sounds really, really bad, but it's difficult to play. So yeah, you should. It's on YouTube, I think. Paul Hindemith. Der Fliegende Holländer.
This is what we are going to perform as team next time.
Yes.
So beware, the next European Spa we are going to, it's going to be a European Spa Hindemith performance at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that it's the prejudice about Kurorchester, because they are mostly like, yeah, as I said, they are a forgotten like musical scene. They are paid bad. People say they are not well educated. They just play a profane repertoire and they play it 5 times a day for 20 years. And so, yeah, it is the prejudice. And yeah, it's like a police orchestra.
Can I perhaps jump in there, because this is one of the questions that I also have, and perhaps I can use the opportunity that Rutger is still with us, who's at least a historian of music, so he knows probably a lot more than we about it. I mean, sort of one of the things that sort of strike us is that in the historical sources we meet a lot of remarks on itinerant musicians that go to the seaside resorts or to the spas in the summer season, and I was wondering whether the whole kind of tradition of the bandstands and the music comes up is also a kind of attempt of regulating or formalizing musical life in a spa, Or is it rather something that is, like many other aspects of the spa culture, something that sort of transcends the limits of court culture and is rather a kind of copycatting of what, let's say, the princes and kings had in their sort of residences, and is now sort of transferred into a kind of more public space of the spa? Is there anything that we can say about the historical development here?
Oh, well, I'm sure there is. I don't have any really concrete answers. I should confess. It's what you ask is partly about just also what came first in a way, and I wouldn't know for the spas. Yeah, what I do know is that it was quite a prominent scene for traveling musicians, for virtuosos, and so on, to move through these spas, to have a lucrative extra season, you know, outside the concert world. But as far as I have looked at it, I mean, that's usually, I mean, from halfway the 19th century onwards, when these places were already quite established. So I don't know how that came into being. That's certain.
Thank you.
Would be interesting, but
maybe to answer the two questions from Henrike. They are still open. So, what is specific for the spa stage? I could not find out by now, but I would say definitely it's that you come in the like the sound space. You come by coincidence, right? Like strolling through the park, and there's no shield. Like the sound immersion goes over the park, and so you always come in by that, and it's like mostly, like as I said, entrance free. And other stages, it's like festival areas you have to attend to, you have to go, you have to communicate before, etc. And this, like, and then there's the concept of like music for healing. You come there because you have like maybe a certain health problem, and it's not just for like consuming for entertainment. And so and then there was also the bygone tea dances in the past. So you go there for social gathering, for community building, for getting together. And this is just one difference I can say. And about the informal performances, it's just something that I saw. There are so many videos in the internet, like if you go on YouTube or Instagram and you look for those hashtags, it's full with people just going there singing, even securities in the park that should go and get people out there. I saw like some security in like live in Bad Homburg who were just like a hobby opera singer, I guess. And just they are not, there's no fence around it, there's no gate like a door most of the time, or you can just climb because the stage is just like 1.40 meters. And so people go up there daytimes, night times, sometimes even with instruments, and it's common to hijack them. Yeah.
There was a question for Rutger and Kathleen, I see also. Rutger, would you start?
Yeah, well, I had to start just very sort of basic question. I was wondering about, I mean, we can still see it on the PowerPoint, about seating.
Seating.
Yeah, so related to Christian's questions actually, because this sort of, there was a whole tradition, of course, also of having these park orchestras, not necessarily at spas, where people could pass by. And there seems to be quite a fundamental difference between the places where you have seating arrangement and places where it's actually, well, that the audience could be mobile. Even if it's not for tickets. Once you take a seat, you sort of become more committed to the event, and you have a different relation, maybe also to the architectural side of things.
Yeah.
So how does that play into your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so too. I was thinking it's sitting is yeah, it's a way for concentration and to be in this line of concentration. But also, I thought for the sick people or old people, it's different to an open air situation where you dance or yeah. This is also an interesting topic.
Yeah, this I don't know to what extent you've read into this, but I know there's lots of people interested in sort of rejuvenating classical music by doing precisely what some of these sort of 19th century style events did, like taking away the silence, allowing people to have drinks, allowing people to walk about, and so on. And these are the types of innovations for concert culture which actually draw on the types of, you know, situations you've also been studying. So that might be interesting to connect to. I don't know, internationally, I don't know, for instance, there's a composer here in the Netherlands, Micha Hamel, who did a project about sort of how we can reinvent concert culture.
Yeah, what's the name again?
Micha Hamel, I think that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm not sure if he published in any other language than Dutch about it, though. So it's.
Okay, I think next on the line was Astrid. Is that right?
It's Kathleen first.
Ah, Kathleen first.
Yes, I have a question, though I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it. I really liked the idea. I never thought of it before about how these bandstands, how egalitarian they are and how basically anyone can access them because you don't have to pay a ticket to go listen to the music. But in the cycle of decay and revitalization, perhaps in terms of their cultural importance or provenance, when these spa towns kind of fell out of fashion, I don't know if you know about the individual institutions, like did the bandstands kind of hold on longer than perhaps the theaters or the operas of spa towns, or were they the first to go because they didn't have the economic funding? And in terms of the upswing, were they some of the first places that were funded for revitalization because it was more for the community as a whole?
I don't know yet, but this is a thing that is also definitely on the list to get to know about with other communities and other municipals here in Germany, because we as a Kulturamt, like as the city administration, we actually have no money for our bandstand, and it's always just renovated from public associations and Vereine. I'm sorry. Yeah, and so it's mostly by the cultural association. It's supported and renovated by themselves, or they collect donations for new technical parts, and yeah. So most of the ones I've seen haven't been renovated for a long time, and they are like in their 70s and 80s.
I think then it's Astrid next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to get back to the slide you showed us from Kissingen, where we have the Wandelhalle, so that's the promenade with a roof, and the bandstand at one of its ends. Because here we have this sort of a parallel. Yes, we have either the bandstand in the Kur Park, and again you reach it by promenading, by going along the main alley, or you have it as part of a built environment to protect you from the weather. And I wonder whether we have any knowledge about what was there first, the inside or the outside one.
It was directly built as like a kinetic, like a movable stage, but in the opening concert, the day, well, I have some notes somewhere, but like at the opening concert, they started outside and then they turned inside. That's just what I know. So yeah, when it was the initial inauguration of the bandshell. Yeah.
That's just this one place. Do you have any knowledge about this in general, whether the bandstand as such was there first inside or outside? I mean, except for this one wonderful example where it is both.
Not yet, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just misuse my position to jump in once more. But one of the things that I also permanently was reminded of, particularly when you were talking about the temporality and also mobility of this type of sculpture slash architecture, right? I was reminded of what we see now as reactions to sort of the restructuring of a lot of office space, including our own university, where all of a sudden small kind of, shall I call them, shells or sort of shelters are structuring large halls where people meet, so that they sort of give a sort of intimacy and also a possibility to talk in smaller groups, although you have these bigger rooms which are cheaper and easier to administer. So in a sense, there seems to be a sort of indoor revival of these types of things. And that also sort of brings me to another kind of similarity, and I'm pretty sure this is a bit unfair because beyond your remit, but I was also reminded of a typical kind of feature of park architecture that in Russia is called besietka. So the place where you lead a little conversation, right? There are also these kind of kiosks. They're not made for music playing, or perhaps not exclusively, but they're made for people to get together in this kind of natural surrounding with a roof on top of them and for kind of conversation. I think they have sort of parallels and tea houses and similar things in many parts.
And Wetterpilze.
No, it's not the rustic form in German forests where you have them as well, but really like classical kind of architecture, right, with pillars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Have you come across them? Is there a kind of link between these types of architecture?
I think I haven't seen the besietka by now.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have to get to Google some pictures then.
I have to apologize because I don't know the English term. Astrid, do you know what I mean by besietka?
I know what you mean, but I don't know whether there's an English term for
that.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is something to research in the future.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are there other questions or comments? Yeah, sorry, Astrid, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. It was already mentioned that you showed us bandstands in spa towns, in Kur parks, but then also went to other places, prominently cities like London. And I would like to come back to that, and I would like to work on the link a little bit more. Am I right in thinking that at least we always have a park, so we always have the kind of the outside bandstand as part of a landscape, a landscaped park, or are there incidences where not even this is the case? Because I think that has a lot of influence on the function of this thing.
Yeah. I haven't seen any except of Kirchdorf. They built quite a new construction that is on a like concrete place in the middle of the city. It's like it's not in a park and not in a spa resort. This is the only example that comes in my mind right now. But yeah, you're right. The most are centered in parks, definitely.
Which would at least mean we have similar activities going on. Yes, we have the strolling, we have the leisurely aspect, we have the sociable aspect, Yeah, so this is what I do when I'm in a park in the city rather than working.
Henrike?
So yes, thank you for having the chance to ask another question. It's the inevitable European spa question coming from our title, like the transnational aspect. You touched upon it slightly, nevertheless. Do you already have an idea, a hypothesis in how far the style of these sculptures is, these music pavilions is influenced by transnational, pan-European architectural trends, or relying rather on regional styles? So I remember having been in Bavaria in summer and having seen these bandstands covered with woods from the region, and the same is valid for the music, because there, of course, it was Bavarian regional music. So I know you're just starting, but for us, of course, that's of a huge interest. So how would you weigh the transnational versus regional aspect in this kind of sculptural architecture?
I think you can read this more from the kind how the music developed, played by the exchanging of musicians, orchestras, conductors, etc. But with the bandstands, I would say there's typical influence, but like oriental ornaments, definitely, and also like Chinese kiosks. You can see something like this. So there might be an architectural influence, and there's something special. There are just a few notes about it. It's like the floral ornaments, but I don't mean the floral like intarsias or frescoes or something. There's like floral decoration, like flowers and plants, and this is something that came to me that was really like exotic, oriental also, and it happened in like the past and now contemporary also. So yeah, this could be, but yeah, like mostly the oriental or Chinese kiosk. Like you can see some pavilions in Bad Homburg in the park that are like presents from like diplomat presents from the past. Yeah, they are not for the use of music, they are for the springs. Like yeah, good, definitely.
I've just seen that Marc Joseph has sent us I think a reference to a publication to the musical kiosks. Marc, do you want to comment on that briefly? Obviously not. That's fine as well.
Somehow I can't see the chat.
Okay, sort of
maybe I have to stop the presentation.
Which we can, you should be able to see the chat either besides the images of the participants or in this
here
row down below.
Yeah. Yeah, I know this text, but I could not find it by now.
Okay.
I know it from footnotes. Thank you. That reminds me. Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're all a bit overwhelmed by the many sort of directions that by Natasha that this this research can go, and the many inspirations that we're taking from it. Perhaps it's now the time to thank Sabine-Lydia Schmidt again for her very interesting presentation. I think.
Thank you for supporting that. Yeah.
And we will definitely try to be in touch and have a totally new kind of vision of what these small kind of sculptures / buildings in the spa mean and how important they are. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye. This was the last talk in our online seminar series for this year, but we're actively preparing a new series that is about to start probably in February next year, and we will keep you posted about the newest developments in that respect. For those whom we probably won't meet this year again, we wish you hopefully a healthy kind of end of the year, and see you back healthy next year. Goodbye.